There you go. You're good to go.
Okay, call to order on Peter Echo Budget Advisory Committee. Roll call.
Laura Schultz, Cooper, Budget Advisory Committee.
Oh, Jenny Nolan, Budget Manager.
Kevin Ingles, Finance Director.
Tyson Thornburg, Budget and Financial Analyst.
Sean Lewis, City Manager.
Nevin Mondel, Budget Advisory Committee.
Sarah Stone, Deputy Director for Business Solutions and Engineering for Utilities.
Peter Van Ryn, Director of South Platte Renew and Utilities.
Steve Moore, Council Liaison.
James Horan, Budget Advisory Committee.
Great, thank you. And can we move to approve the November minutes?
I'll move to approve.
Seconded.
Thank you, Nevin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks. Okay, we're gonna try to not take the full time today. We'll just commit 15 to 20 minutes at the end to sales and use tax, and Devin's put a nice presentation together, so we'll want to go through that, and we'll have one or two items we'll need to vote on to move forward with for future meetings, and with that we'll let Peter and Sarah present about utilities and South Platte Renew both.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for having both of us. I have 78 slides, and I promise I will get through them in 30 minutes.
Great.
Look forward to it. Well, because we're running a couple minutes late, and I want to make sure we're on time. So I think we can do it. Actually, we'll stop where you all maybe have some questions along the way. But again, like we've done in the past, it's really more of our strategic overview of how we're executing the priorities and needs for utilities in South Platte Renew, and with a focus on on how we're financially making all that work, which predominantly comes through the utilities, water and sewer funds. All right, so let's get rolling. So what we're going to cover both departments, and then time for questions at the end. Start with utilities, and as many of you know, utilities for the water fund, water surface area, we cover 34,000 residents, 2,100 businesses. The water service area is a little bit broader than just the city proper. You see in that lower left corner, that's where we extend. So we have some extraterritorial areas that we serve for water. And then on the sewer side, we serve about 2/3 of the city. The southern 1/3-ish is South Englewood Sanitation District. And so our sewer, but we contractually provide service for them for maintaining the sewer system. You can see some of the data in terms of how many miles. It's for a small little city, we have a lot of miles of pipe. Okay, next slide. We are in the strategic plan outcome area of infrastructure. That is what we do, and I think it's pretty direct connection. And we also connect to, next slide, sustainability. So because it's water is a huge sustainability, and wastewater treatment is really the first major sustainability initiative in the country, going back to the Clean Water Act in the 70s. So we'll move on to the next slide. Sorry, I'm about to get some water.
I'll lift you up.
Yeah, thank you. I can feel it coming. So, thank you, Sean. So our overall utility strategy that we nailed down within the last couple of years are two basic areas. We want to modernize the utility, and we're doing that through all the things you see there: investment in the infrastructure, replacing the assets, maintaining the program, building the right staffing levels, and optimizing the systems that we have. And then ultimately, that should result in an improved customer experience with your utilities. And so we want to improve the taste, odor, and hardness primarily. A lot of our projects focus on that. Customer service, financial transparency, and billing interface, which I'm sure if you all want to talk a little bit about the billing system, we'll have some time at the end to discuss the challenges associated with that project. Next slide. So these are our estimated balances. And you can see we're running a little bit under on some things, a little bit over on a couple other things. The one I'll point out there is the debt service. And the reason why that one's so much higher is because we closed some loans this year that we immediately had to start paying debt service on. And so we have that corrected for the 2025 budget. We weren't sure we were going to have those loans closed at the time when we did the 2024 budget, and fortunately we did. So I think if you look at the bottom, essentially we're at about 67% execution of the overall financial plan, which is not necessarily where we want to be yet, but we are trending in the right direction. The main thing that is impacting that is the timing of capital execution. You can see we have 31.8 million budgeted, and it's just capital takes longer than we originally, it takes longer than we wanted to. But now we've got some major programs like the lead service line program that are underway, and that's really going to start to execute a significant amount of capital. Next slide.
Are those, real quick,
Yep.
Peter, are those year-to-date or the full-year numbers?
It's projected through the end of the year, right?
Projected through the end of the year.
So you're giving back 16 million to the general fund?
Nope, all this stays in the water enterprise fund.
Okay.
So all it does is goes to fund balance, and then we reprogram it.
Great.
So
Okay, so it'll be delayed capital, it looks like, and some delayed personnel, I guess that relates to capital projects.
yeah, and the personnel piece is really because we finally became fully staffed about a month ago, and we were fully staffed for about 2 weeks, and now we have 2 openings again. So,
Okay.
and I think we're always going to run a little bit of vacancy. For the first several years, we were ramping up a lot of staffing because we were so understaffed. We have hit what we think that optimal level is, and if we're generally seeing about 2 to 5 openings on a kind of a rotating basis. That's kind of what we would expect. And so in our budgeting process, we have a salary savings component that we incorporate into that financial plan, or that budget, so that we don't always overestimate our employees. We still end up with a bit under, but if we stay fully staffed, that gap should come down significantly.
And fully staffed is what headcount?
63. Well, all right, so we have 63 approved positions. We have 2 that are awaiting our transition to monthly billing for connector districts, which is the 80,000 customers outside the city that we bill for South Platte Renew through Englewood. So Sarah and her billing staff, we bill for the 35,000 residents in the city of Englewood, but then we bill sewer treatment services and other actually components. We do the billing for another 80,000 plus or minus.
And that's directly related to services you provide?
It's directly related to connector agreements for South Platte Renew. And within some of those connector agreements, we provide the billing for not just South Platte Renew, but other aspects of their sewer bill. So sometimes what we do is we collect revenue on their behalf, and then we just credit it back to them,
Makes sense.
the districts.
And the debt service overage was just specific timing issue, or?
No, because we closed actually a couple of key loans this year that we weren't sure we were going to be able to, we weren't sure about, so we'll talk about that a little bit.
Okay, great, thanks.
Next slide. Sewer fund is, so this one runs a little bit in arrears. The large numbers on this one are the contractual and capital, which is essentially supporting, the vast majority of that supporting South Platte Renew. But because of the way South Platte Renew charges hit the sewer fund, it just runs behind. So it looks like it's under a lot more than it is. When we talk about South Platte Renew, you'll see that budget expenditure amount, I think we're at like 97% budget execution, which gets me in the nervous window, but the great window, I mean, that's about as optimal as you want to be, but it also gets you nervous because you're so close.
A couple of bad days, right? But
Yeah, well,
it's a well-set budget, so
Exactly. So we don't want to be, we want to be at 95% or greater. But when you start to get to like 97, 98, then you start to get to appropriation issues. And so hitting a 97 on South Platte, it's taken us 4 or 5 years to get to that solid budget execution. A lot of that has to do with the way we initially set up our budgets and the way we do month-to-month forecasting. We have forecasting tools over there that we use to make sure that our cash flow is matching, because that information has to feed not just Englewood Sewer Fund, but Littleton Sewer Fund as well. And so we have responsibility to two cities from a financial perspective to make sure that we don't surprise them with significant charges.
And that forecast is done every month?
Yeah, we do that forecasting monthly, and then we provide that to both sewer funds, so that they can then incorporate it into financial models.
Great, thanks.
And one of the main reasons we set that up was because there was a point in time a few years ago where we were projecting that we were going to start bouncing checks in about the February, March timeframe, because we didn't have a good handle on cash flow. And so we built cash flow forecasting models both at utilities and at South Platte Renew, so that we have a much better timing of understanding the timing of when a contractor is working on projects and when that is being paid compared to when we have the revenue in the sewer fund.
Yeah, 30 days can make all the difference.
Yeah, 30 days can make, and the way we build, and also the way we bill the connector district sewer funds, we bill from June through November annually. And so a lot of the revenue comes in June through November because we send all those people outside the city a one-time $400 a year bill. That's actually the feedback we've been getting back to the staffing, is to move to a monthly billing so that it's more predictable for them. It always hits around the holidays too, so they always like that when they're not thinking about it, and all of a sudden their $400 sewer bill comes in October. Right. And so we've gotten feedback on that. And actually some of the districts have come to us and said, can you do this? We need to get through this billing system process, let that settle down, and then we'll move that. So we're holding two positions to support that once we move there, but we're still a couple of years out.
Thanks.
Next slide. So our metrics, you can see over the last 2 years, because of video and jetting, we have flushed the main sewer system. We have implemented a more programmatic approach to that, to utilize instead of just flushing everything, we are utilizing the baseline video information to flush more appropriately as opposed to just flushing everything. So that's actually a program that's become more efficient. 891 hydrants. Valve exercising is a huge thing. So part of the biggest challenge with our system is the valves haven't been moved in decades. And so if there's a line break, we need to shut off the valve. They break the stem. If they have to go back 2 more valves. They break 2 more stems. And then all of a sudden you've got, 3 streets out because we're trying to isolate a break. If you recall this summer, there was a break just east of Broadway, 1 block east of Broadway between Old Hamden and whatever that is that Gilpin, the next one north. But those leaked for 6 weeks because we could not isolate it. Because when we tried to isolate it, we broke another valve, and then it came and we couldn't get it shut off, and so they were flowing water for a significant period of time. As a result, we become trained in this, it's called insert a valve. So we bought the technology, we become trained in the technology, so we can actually go in and we can cut in a new valve to isolate a broken valve, and that issue that persisted for 6 weeks downtown, now we can get that corrected with our own crews over the course of, a couple days.
So it's a new, steel fitting that goes
Yeah, you basically dig it up and
the center of the old core.
it drops it in, and it cuts it into the pipe all while it's, under pressure and a wet tap essentially. And then there's another technology, it's called valve stop. Same kind of thing, where instead of inserting a whole valve, it inserts a temporary stop, and then that stop blocks the water from flowing. Part of the challenge we had was if we decided to move forward with the fix of the break as it was, the risk was we wouldn't be able to get it shut off, and once we cut into the pipe, we wouldn't be able to stop the flow. And so then we moved from a leak to now you've got flowing water that we have no way to stop. And so that's why we took a step back. And that's why we let it leak for, 4 or 5 weeks, was because we were procuring the valves from across the country and being able to ensure that when we did isolate it, we weren't going to be stuck with an open pipe that we could not isolate, that we couldn't stop. We also had to replace a valve in Broadway in order to isolate the 18-inch main in order to get to that leak. So this technology that we just recently became trained in just in the last couple of weeks, gives us a whole lot more flexibility on our valve program, because valves is one of our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
We replaced a lot of them a couple of years ago. We still have a lot that we're working on, but getting out there and just exercising them is a huge, makes a huge difference.
Is it reasonable to conject that had they been being opened every 2 or 3 years, or whatever your timing is now in the past, that would have helped us?
It would have helped. I mean, ultimately the system's old.
Deferred maintenance.
Ultimately, the system, it's deferred maintenance, but it's also if something hasn't moved in a long time and you move it, a lot of times it breaks, especially when you're talking about rusting and things like that.
Okay.
Speaking of breaks, that says 43 lines. As of today, I think we're at 55 line breaks for this year. And so, AWWA has a standard based on our size that we should be nothing more than 41. So by fixing the valves, then we can then move on to fixing the prone areas for line breaks. And so that's progressively how we're making progress, and we really are making progress. Next slide. Water budget for next year, you can see revenues are 33 million. Some of that's 18 million in borrowing proceeds. And then our total expenses are 53. And so the biggest part of that is the lead service line program, which is fully underway right now. We've replaced thus far 450 lines. We think we have somewhere around 2,500, and they're in the process of ramping up. So ideally, this program's done in the next 2 years, which is faster than we ever thought would be possible, which is really good news for us. Next slide. So when you look at the sewer fund, it's pretty close, and the main expense on the sewer fund is the Englewood pays for generally about half of that $39.5 million budget for South Platte Renew. You see it's a little bit more than half, because one part of it is the sewer fund, it's the sewer system itself, which we still have to fund. Part of it is Englewood just sends more flow to South Platte than Littleton. It's about a 54%, 46% split. So because of that, our operational costs are more, there's more cost to Englewood. Next slide. All right, what are we spending our money on? So the water treatment plant, we're modernizing the water treatment plant, and most specifically around electrical instrumentation and control components. And we've got an ongoing program that is updating those controls. You can see in 2025, we're going to spend about just under another $500,000. These are all tied to improving the plant, which improves taste, odor, and hardness. And currently, where we're at is we're in planning design. The solids handling piece of this is in construction. The finished water pump station is in an evaluation stage. And all of these have significant electrical components, because it's big electricity to run these systems. And so that's what that project is. Next slide. Spaces, we are almost at 90% plans for space. And so this is, we're staffed up, except in being staffed up, we were in 4 trailers up until about a month and a half ago, and now or 2 months ago. Now we're at 3 trailers, temporary trailers. And so what these 2 projects do is they give us long-term building space for staff to meet our long-term sustainable staffing plan for Englewood Utilities. So there's a new 2-story building that will go at the Allen plant. That's the upper drawing. We anticipate breaking ground on that probably in March. It's probably about a 1-year construction on that one. And then On the lower, that's at the service center. That building is our distribution and collections building. And we're basically putting a 1-story addition on that so that we have space for our staffing over there. Right now they sit at desks and share space in garage bays. And so this will help modernize both of those for the long term. Next slide. Solids handling, this is dealing with the solid settling pond, south settling pond. This has a direct contribution to taste, odor, and hardness issues because the solids weren't dredged from that pond for years, and we essentially have probably 35 years of solids to get out of there. The belt filter press that is in the picture, we're replacing with a centrifuge. That centrifuge is on order, should come in probably in February, at which point we'll start the construction to install that. And that project, since it's adjacent to where that building project, we're gonna couple those two projects together with the same contractor.
And approximately, what's the useful life of a centrifuge?
Centrifuge, so we have 3 centrifuges at South Platte Renew that were manufactured they've been installed since the 90s, and they just keep spinning. So those have, there's been some rebuilds on them, but in terms of simple technology that lasts a long time, centrifuges last a long time. So those 3 at South Platte Renew that have been running since the 90s, they're still going. So we're, what's that, 35 years? Yeah, 30 some odd years. And we have no plan to replace them anytime soon because they just keep working. It's great. It's a really reliable technology. City ditch, this project has hit a bit of a snag in terms of timing. Our biggest issue is in Reach 2, which is the middle reach there. Is that right? Yeah, middle reach. So Reach 1 to the south, we're working that in association with, say that again? Sorry, Reach 1.
Yeah, Reach 1.
Reach 1's all the way to the south. Yep. So that one we're working with a developer. It's not a lot of cost to that. We've got a contractor that we're gonna work with that here shortly. Reach 2, we've been working on alignment on that. We're looking to utilize the railroad alignment. However, the railroad is extremely difficult to work with, and they won't give us the same property rights for our ditch that protects it long term that I think we need. And so we actually reached out to Denver Water and said, so how do you guys work with the railroad? And they said, we avoid them.
That's what they
That
said.
that was what they said to us. They said, if we ever run across the railroad, we avoid them. We do everything to avoid them.
That's what the truckers say about railroad too.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So-
it doesn't surprise me, I guess.
So we had what we thought was an optimal line. It would work great in the railroad, but they were only gonna give us a license agreement. The ditch has been longer than the railroad, so we did not want to relinquish our property right there. So that's caused us to have to go back to the drawing board on Reach 2. Reach 3 and 4, we anticipate probably will start, and those are the northern reaches there near the Allen plant. We anticipate those will probably start construction here probably mid next year. So the project's running probably about a year behind what we originally wanted, but we're also trying to get the best pricing for it. So that's been a lot of it is contractor negotiation for the best pricing, and that's been a challenge. But we're not going to overpay for it, so we think we're there. It causes a delay. Lead we've talked about a little bit. You can see so we received $40 million this year in low interest loans and grants, and $10 million of that is grant funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the remainder is bipartisan infrastructure law low interest federal loans, as well as drinking water revolving fund low interest loans to the state. And so because we received all that money, we can now execute what in 2020 was an unfunded program. We thought we had an $80 million problem that we did not know how we were going to pay for. Fast forward 4 years, it's a $30 million problem that we have figured out how to pay for, and we'll have it executed in less than 3 years. So that's been a pretty remarkable success that Sarah has been on the leading edge of that, both through WIFIA and those 2 other loans. Next slide. Valves we talked a little bit about. I don't know if we need to go into more detail on that. Next slide. Pump stations, we've got a pump station that's underway near the hospital. We anticipate that'll be done by the end of the year. That's a distribution system pump station. That's the first of 4 that we need to work on, or 5 that we need to work on, but it was a priority one. And so then we'll phase into additional work on the additional pump stations over time. Next slide. AMI, so this is, we're switching all of our old meters that are out of date to the current technology. What this will ultimately do is eventually it'll give customers really good visibility into their water usage. It'll give us really good visibility in our water usage. And the other thing that it does is these modern meters track water usage way more accurately than old meters that are tired and not working. So the older meters, what happens is they don't capture low flows. And so what happens is we're actually not capturing the revenue for water that's being used. And so when we put AMI in, they're much more accurate meters, and there's a more instantaneous collection of that data so that we save staffing. We can divert staffing resources to more customer service focused things as opposed to meter reading. We're about halfway through that right now. Next slide. This is a huge one. We just got we just got notice that we can add this to our WIFIA funding. That's been about a 6-month process. We just got that approval this week. It's a big deal. This is our backup plan. So if something goes catastrophically wrong at the Allen plant, right now, we don't have a lot of backup plans. We don't have a backup plan. Once this is in place, if something goes catastrophically wrong at the Allen plant, we can flip these, we can turn these 2 valves on, and then we can get a backup supply from Denver on an emergency basis. And so once this is in place, we can breathe a little bit more of a sigh of relief from a resiliency perspective. So this is a huge project once we get it executed. Construction should start next year. Next slide. All right, how are we gonna pay for all this? Well, we got $100 million in the last 2.5 years of low interest loans and grants. And so that helps. And here's how we're gonna apply all that. Next slide. So we call this the mountain graph. And essentially what it illustrates is the capital funding needed with the funding to support that. So the blue line is the need. Before we started with securing any of this additional funding, if we had just stayed the way we were in 2020, we had $10.2 million. And so you can see the gap is in the white. So that's when we started long-term financial planning that Sarah has taken a lead on. And so next slide. The first thing we did in 2020 was we just raised the rates and got the capital investment fee in place. So that generated a lot, started to close the gap. Next slide. Throw in some ARPA, because we got $3 million of ARPA that we were able to use in the water funds. That filled the gap. Next slide. Then this is WIFIA. So WIFIA did put a huge dent in our water need, close to $40 million. Next slide. So now we're talking, this is bipartisan infrastructure law money. So that's the federal money from that bill in 2021. You can see 17.5 million of that is, that's the total proceeds, but 10 million of that is principal forgiveness. So it's grant money. It's free money from the feds to pay for our lead program. Next, not for all of it, but a lot of it. Next slide. This is the other piece of that, which is the drinking water revolving fund loan, which we secured both of those at the same time, which is another 22.4 million. Next slide. This is the fee that was just recently approved, which is the $5 a month drinking water revolving fund loan fee that will go on the bill. It was originally supposed to go on the bill in January. However, we just talked to the Water and Sewer Board last week about, our customers have been through a lot with this billing system, and the last thing we want to do is in January put a whole new fee on them when they haven't had stability in their bill. So we're going to actually delay implementation of that fee until probably late 2025. It'll still occur in 2025. It'll just occur later in the year. Give people a little bit of a break. Give them time to have their bill stabilize. Give the consultant time to actually get it into the bill, which is part of the problem too. And so long term, it doesn't hurt us financially. We just have to make up for about $600,000 of revenue currently through other means that basically just pushes some of that timing of money. Next slide. So these are our gaps. So the pink gap is our most immediate gap, which is about $5.5 million. Because we funded the lead program at 40 million and the estimates are looking good that it should come in, we think around 30, that leaves another 10 million that's available that we have been working with the state, that we just got approval from State Historic Preservation Office, which was the biggest hurdle to be able to use some of that money for the distribution system. So beyond just the lead program, we're gonna start fixing some of the distribution lines as well, so we can use that loan money as opposed to using cash from our fund balance. And so closing that gap, that initial 5.5 million, and then that 6.4 million, it's essentially about 12 million. We think 10 will come from that distribution there, that 10 million that I just talked about. The other 2, we think we can optimize. So if you look at that, it gives us a pretty sound financial plan to execute the needs and get through that huge mountain of deferred maintenance and then the next round of the next plateau to get to when you get to 2032. That's when we have a long-term structural financial capital investment piece that we have to look at, because we are going to have debt service through there that we have to pay attention to, and we're going to have ongoing, operational increases. But essentially by putting all this together, we think we're good till about 2031 right now. Based on everything that's been approved and the financial plan that assumes a 4.5% increase on the rates per year, and then every other year there's a $1 increase to the capital investment fund. So to go from 2020, where you can see what we were facing, to we're now climbing, we're at the peak of this mountain, and it'll stretch out a little bit farther because of execution timing. But it's pretty awesome. It's great. So
Impressive.
It's been a lot of work, and I can't say enough about Sarah's work from a financial perspective to make this all happen. It's been just tremendous. Next slide. So this summarizes it. So under investment, mountain, we still have something, but we have about 7 years to figure out how we're going to fix it, which is a good amount of time. Next slide. So what does that do to your bill? So we did comparisons on the bill. We expanded this comparison. We added some more areas. We also added mill levies. So there are districts out there that their monthly bill looks lower because they get a property tax that funds part of their water system. So in purple, you can see some of those districts that look like they were a lot lower. And you may hear from them and say, well, my bill is so much lower, but they have a property tax component. And so we added that to get a more apples to apples comparison. And you can see still we're on the lower end when you look at 6,000 gallons, which is a good average throughout the course of the year. Next slide. We add stormwater to it. So stormwater is hard because the boundaries of stormwater districts are a little bit different. And so we tried to look at total bill. And you can see where we went from 2024 to where we are in 2025. We're still on the lower end. We're moving towards the middle. We're still under the average of this grouping, which you can see is a pretty good distribution of what's to be expected. But it also includes all the rate increases for stormwater, everything that we've got. And so this is what this is what the bill looks like. So when someone's saying, well, my bill is crazy compared to other bills, yeah, it's hard to compare apples to apples because sometimes people get billed their stormwater through some completely different charge or annual billing. So we tried to level set that as much as possible. Next slide. If you use a lot of water, our water usage rate is cheap. So, good for people who use a lot of water in Englewood because it makes the bill cheaper. But you can see we're on the lower end. Next slide. If you use a little bit of water, we move a little bit towards the middle. Keep in mind that this is our 25 rates, but a lot of this doesn't incorporate rate increases that other entities have put forth because we didn't know what those were. So it's our 2025 rates compared to their 2024 rates. So all of this somewhat corrects over time. There's a bit of a lag. Next slide. That's it for the water and sewer fund.
Can I just ask on that last point, you said for people that use a lot of water, we're actually fairly cheap. And I guess A question that immediately comes to mind. Are we, sorry, not incentivizing conservation with that kind of a fee structure?
Our structure does not incentivize conservation. We are the last structure in the state that we know of that has a declining block rate structure. And so what a declining block rate structure is if you use your first 30,000 gallons, it's $3.91. But if you use over 30,000 gallons, it drops. So the rate drops.
And it's
So
actually more like 100,000.
Is it 100,000?
Yeah.
All right. So other more modern billing utilities, their first like 2,000 is a certain rate, and then they go to 5,000, or maybe it's 5,000, and then they go to 15,000, and then anything over 15,000 is a huge penalty for. So every other water provider that I've worked for, that's how it works. It's an inclining block rate structure. Ours is a declining block rate structure, which does not incentivize conservation. Our plan is to move to that. However, we are going to take a couple of years off of messing with the billing system before we do that. It is in our water efficiency plan that's been approved by the state that we have to do that sometime in the next 10 years. The next 10 years? 7 years. So it's on our list of things to do. But keep in mind that the revenue need, the revenue need is the revenue need. And so when you move from a declining block to an inclining block, you still have to capture the revenue. So that's what we have to look at, is how if we incentivize conservation, how do we ensure that we don't under collect for revenue? And so that's why you see the $15 capital investment, or $17 capital investment fee. That's not dependent on usage, because the system needs that no matter what. The drinking water revolving fund loan debt repayment, we have to pay that no matter what people use. And so you create stability by going more with fees, but you add some incentive by the variable rate, which is at $3.91. But you're right.
Yeah.
We are unique.
Well, thank you for that. And I wasn't asking from a revenue perspective, but from the perspective of, the fact that we have an increasing population and climate change, and it startles me to see how Colorado uses its water, frankly. And,
Yep.
So that just jumped out at me, that fee structure.
Well, and yes, like I said, we're one of the relics of the past as it relates to that fee structure, and we plan to fix it. We're gonna take a little bit of time off of messing with the bills. We want people to get a little bit stable with their bills before we go mess a whole other thing up.
And related to that, one comment, not so much a question, but I know I've heard from a few people who are on the auto pay with their bill. Getting whacked in December with a large bill was particularly bad timing. And I guess a suggestion would have been, there's that comment box on the statement, and there was in fine print there, this may be more than 1 month or something like that. But it might have been helpful to have a little bit more information about that. I know I myself called and had a wonderful person who answered the phone and walked me through everything that was behind that, and that was helpful. And I shared that back out to folks in my neighborhood that were complaining. We appreciate some feedback.
It seems like that should be an easy thing to do, right? To put a big note on the bill that says that, don't worry about this. We're suspending shutoffs and late fees. So if people hit a big bill, they can take a few months to pay it down. And we had that in there. But just to get that text in there, that's been part of the challenge with our billing system, is how difficult that is and how limiting that is. And so that's part of actually what we're working through, is how the bill shows up. The billing system itself in the background is working. So it's collecting the right information, it's charging the right information. It's how it's representing on the bill template. That is what has been killing us for 5 months. And it's just, and we were on a call again today, and it seems like this should be a simple thing to produce. But it got so customized throughout the course of the development that it's got so customized. We have so many different unique situations because we we bill for connector districts, we bill for these other entities, all these different ways that it just became a challenge. But to your point, we tried to get it on there, and that's the best we could get it on based on the limitations of it.
And again, not a criticism,
No,
just a
please.
little bit of feedback, and your staff is lovely. Every time I've ever had to call, they answer the phone and are a fountain of information, pardon the pun, so.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that feedback. It is great for them to hear that because they hear from a lot of people who
I'm
share the other perspective.
I'm sure they're getting an earful.
Yeah, it's been really hard on them, actually. They've been getting people, people are mean. I mean, that's a lot of what it is. They're just mean. In terms of like how they, not everybody, I mean, that's not what I mean, but some people are just really, that's not what I mean. But some
Extremely
people.
frustrated.
It's frustrating, okay, fair point. That's what I mean, it's how they communicate sometimes, and I'm sorry, let me, because this is a publicly recorded thing, it's not what I mean, I'm not saying that, I wanna be clear on this, it's that they're dealing with people who have frustration that boils over on the phone, and it comes across probably not in the best way that they would normally articulate that, and we understand it, we get it, but it does wear on them, and it's something that we're trying to balance that. So let me apologize right now. That is not what I'm trying to say, and I would like to, just I don't want to represent it that way. I want to empathize with that. They are really good, and they've been dealing with a lot. So. Okay, so I'm going to do South Platte really quickly because I'm over my 30 minutes. We're a regional entity, and we serve 300,000 people in the Southwest Metro area. We're a joint venture, and it's 50-50 ownership. 108 square miles goes all the way down to Roxborough. You can see that there's the green is Englewood, the orange is Littleton. Next slide. Our vision, mission, values: renewing water for Colorado's future. We made a couple tweaks to our mission this year to make it more customer focused because we wanted to make sure we were focused on the customer, and you can see our values down below. Next slide. Our department metrics: we did 6.9 billion gallons of water renewed, 19.7 million in capital projects executed, 22.1 million in gross receivables on the biogas injection. We land applied a bunch of biosolids. We deferred a lot of CO2, and then done a number of equipment rebuilds and lab analyses, all those kinds of things. Next slide. You can see that this is where we're actually pretty close. So 41.7 was our budget. We're projected to execute about 40.8. Next slide. Our budget, they match because whatever we expense goes directly to the two enterprise funds. So they always match because we're a direct charge to those two sewer funds. Next slide. Accomplishments. So huge project, modernize our operations and admin complex. So we remodeled the existing space and then added a wing, and it'll set us up for the next 50 years for that place, which is really, it was definitely needed. And so we've got a nice and modern facility. We would encourage people if they want to come by and tour it. We'd be happy to show anybody because it's really a nice. It actually helps with retention as well. Recruitment and retention, because space actually is a space that people are really proud to come in, and they have the right equipment. We have a nice new process maintenance area. We have a nice new control room that our operators can work in. So it's really it's set us up for the long term. Next slide. You can see our master plan. Basically, we have to be working on things throughout the plant over the next 5 to 10 years. All the systems, a lot of this is driven by increasing regulation, as well as just ongoing infrastructure investment as things wear out. Next slide. Master plan, we started, so here's some of the major elements. So the headworks process, that's the oldest part of the site right now. And it's the part that receives the most difficult wastewater because it's the raw sewage. So we're upgrading that for the short term. Long term, we're gonna have to replace it probably the next 25 years or something like that. But right now, this will bridge the gap until that time. We have nitrogen requirements that we need to continue to make upgrades on. That's removing nitrogen from the wastewater. The temperature is a huge issue. So the temperature of the water that we release to the stream, there's a graph that we're supposed to meet, and certain points in the year, our water is warmer than what the receiving water should receive. So that's actually one that we're working with the state on to make sure that we have a sensible solution on. But right now, the technology solution is cooling towers. So we would spend $25 million to put in cooling towers to cool down the water a few degrees before we discharge it to the stream. And that is really, that is what we're facing. We're trying to work with the state to come up with a more holistic, application, because once you put in cooling towers, now you've got an energy cost. And so we're trying to come up with but that's just ongoing work that we do that we work. The temperature is a big deal. And then working on our carbon redirection. So that's how we need carbon through the system. And so we utilize carbon, but then we also have, we defer carbon from going into the atmosphere through our biogas system. And then 2030 and beyond, it's nutrients. That's really that's our main drivers. 2035, 2040 timeframe is really the nutrient regulations that are going to cause us, we're not talking tens of millions of dollars, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's what we're preparing for. Next slide. We developed a formal strategic plan this year. These are our 5 pillars: proactive long-range planning, fiscal responsibility and transparency, innovation and partnerships, SPR safe, and employee experience. Next slide. How are we getting ahead of all this? We have invested a lot of time and energy in what's called our pilot and research center. So instead of waiting until the regulations hit us and then looking at what's available and trying to make it work for our site, we're taking the leading edge on this. And so you see those 2 trailers there. Those are 2 pilot systems that are in place right now at the plant that are designed to find us solutions for our plant and work with technology providers, universities, leverage the broader wastewater community to find solutions to these long-term problems. So we're using all kinds of methods to get out there to build those partnerships so that we can inject that innovation into our system so that we can find the solutions sooner than later. Next slide. Here's what it's resulted in. We're part of $16 million worth of research and innovation project funds. So we don't get all of that, but we are part of all of that, a significant amount of which does come back to us in terms of investment or ongoing investment in the development of the technologies for our site. Next slide. So this is what we have going right now. We have 22 active partnerships in 2024. You can see universities, NREL's up there, technology providers, the Water Research Foundation. So we are trying to approach innovation differently for the wastewater industry to, again, get ahead of these, to drive these technology innovations, to bring that significant dollar amount that we know we are facing in the late 2030s down. And if if technology providers are testing it on our site and we find the solution, we know it works for our site, and then they can go try it in other places. So it's really, and frankly, this is actually one of the things that makes it exciting from a recruitment and retention perspective. So this is what gets, people who are passionate and smart about water and wastewater and sustainability wanting to work here as opposed to other places. Next slide. We are working on PFAS, so this is the forever chemicals, so we're in a project working to characterize those and try and figure out where they're coming from. Actually, incidentally, one of the places that we discovered is a huge PFAS contributor is carpet cleaners. So all this carpet has PFAS in them, they clean them, they discharge it to the sewer, gives us a nice spike of PFAS that they pulled out of the carpet. So we're looking at, how do we potentially regulate that discharge. Next slide. SPR Safe is our focus on safety. We had a couple close calls over, a few years ago, and so we have transformed our culture from a safety perspective, which is focusing on people, because we are a complex industrial facility, and we have a lot of dangerous elements that people work on a daily basis, and so this focus on SPR Safe as a programmatic culture has really taken hold, and it's been a great. I've seen safety programs where it's more of a passing obligation, and what I wanted was something that was integrated into how people operate, and this has worked in terms of that cultural integration. Next slide. We do a lot of outreach. We want people to understand what their bill goes to, so we work to clean out the river. We have Waterfest annually, and we just did our grease and oil take back. Next slide. We develop our staff through our leadership program, and so we graduated a third cohort of that, and that program has actually expanded into citywide with the city of Englewood, and also city of Littleton is adopting the same program and expanding it to leadership development in both the two cities on that. So that's been a nice development in terms of investment in strong leadership in our organization. Next slide. Capital projects. So SCT enhancement, these are solid context tanks. We have a project that's underway. Essentially, we're upgrading that. It's ahead of schedule and under budget. Next slide. These are air scour things. The project's budget's $850,000. It's underway. It's going well. Next slide. This is the schedule of it. Next slide. Our headworks improvement project, that's a significant investment we need to make because that's the most primary point where the water first enters. And it's really rough on equipment. So 4.3 million on that project. We're in the design. We're doing our guaranteed maximum prices right now, which we're just initiating the construction on this. Next slide. So you can see that schedule. We should be done March of 2025. Construction starts through April 2026. We're procuring long lead items right now. Next slide. Our DAFT and dissolved air flotation thickening process and MCCs, which is motor control centers, and so that's a lot of the electrical brains that make these things work. So we've got a project there. Next slide. You can see that's kind of what we're fixing is how those things all control from electricity and controls perspective. $3.5 billion. We have these throughout the facility, and so we're constantly doing projects to replace those over time because they hit end of useful life, and we don't want to use them too far beyond their useful life. Next slide. You can see the November we did GMP2, which is guaranteed maximum price, which is part of our contracting model. So that's what the next phase is. We're moving into GMP3, and then we'll continue to ultimately get into construction once a lot of those are long lead items. So an MCC could be upwards of 50 weeks to get those. There was a point in time they were 50 weeks. I think they're down to about a half a year procurement lead time. Next slide. So financials on natural gas, so this is what we've been, our environmental offset is 49 million car miles since the program's inception in 2019. That's a lot of diverted car miles. Next slide. You can see this is what the renewable identification number, this is where the revenue comes off of this. It's an EPA program. You can see that significant drop that occurred that coincided with the election. And this is somewhat expected that it would drop. We're very close to paying this off. And so we hope it'll stabilize probably around the 225 per RIN. We were operating for quite some time at over $3 a RIN, which has been really good. Next slide. You see what that means in terms of payback. So we think somewhere in Q2, we should get this fully paid back. And so then everything beyond that, it becomes, so the initial investment will be fully paid back, and then we'll be, it's not profit, but we call it profit, but it's actually called rate offsetting revenue. And so it offsets, rates. And assuming that the program still does continue, it'll continue to offset rate revenue, rate need. Next slide. So this is what our sensitivity analysis is in terms of, if we have high RIN prices, it could be as early as, early next year. But if the market drops out and we drop down to about $1.55, it could be into 2026. We anticipate, like I said, middle of 2025-ish is what we're thinking. We're really hopeful it was going to be March, but with the drop, it's going to be a little bit longer. Next slide. What do we have ahead of us? You can see basically it's regulations. Regulations is our big thing. So PFAS, salinity, ammonia, temperature, arsenic, all these things are just ongoing requirements that we have to be planning for long term, because the regulatory process takes years, and then the implementation, and then the building these systems. You don't just build these; they don't come off the shelf. They take several years of planning and execution to build them. So you can see that's the plan. Next slide. That's what it means in terms of cost. So the 10-year capital at SPR is $260 million. That's the capital need. So we right now spend our annual capital is somewhere around 16 million a year. So the next 5 years is, tracks with that at 82 million. It's that next 5 years, 2030 to 34. That's where Park is going to help us drive that down. And it looks like a lot. Our financials our financial plan model actually is set up to be able to handle this pretty well. And we're working with Littleton to make sure that that's the case with them as well. And so it's a big number, but we have a much bigger customer base. So it's 300,000 people as opposed to 35,000. Next slide. Cybersecurity is a huge thing. And one of the things that we're trying to balance here is security versus transparency. So I sent a couple people to a presentation that was being led by Idaho National Labs. And essentially what they said was, because we're so good at telling our customers what we do with our money, we give a roadmap for bad actors to be able to find ways into our systems and compromise them. So it's as simple as, if someone is using a particular charge, they're using a particular vendor, there are programs out there that someone can go and procure to mine that information and expose us. So we want to be transparent with how money's being used, but we don't want to do it at the expense of security of the water and wastewater system. So that's a big deal that we're trying to figure out that balance over the next few years. Next slide. Recruitment and retention, it's an ongoing challenge to hire the top talent and keep them retained. We think we're doing all right. We had a spell of a number of vacancies at SPR. It was funny, we were fully staffed at utilities and we were down several positions at SPR. We're ramping that back up again, but it's interesting. We're either down at utilities and we're good at SPR, or it flips. So I don't know. It'd be great if they both stayed fully staffed.
Right.
There's 88 FTEs at SPR, so 63 at the in utilities and 88 at SPR. And so, next slide. So essentially, this is our future. We can lead the industry and we meet regulatory drivers. We can drive the best value for our customers. We're trying to intersect these three circles. Next slide. That's it. Questions and comments on SPR? Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that, anyway, it's almost overwhelming. There's so many things that you have to consider. But certainly, from the budget committee standpoint, review, medium to long-term planning is certainly critical for you all. Really, as soon as 5 years from now.
Yeah. That's what we're constantly trying to stay ahead of it and trying to make sure that the financial models that are run out of the utility, water, and sewer fund are meeting the ongoing pressure from a regulatory and just an infrastructure investment and asset management need. And so, when I started here 6 years ago, we were doing year-to-year budgeting, and now we're these models that we put in place and that the council supported us implementing, which resulted in increases to customers' bills. You see, it's resulting in an execution of modernizing these systems, and we couldn't get the loans unless we had the revenue to be able to support paying back the loans. And so the federal money doesn't come in unless we make sure that the rates are such that they can support it. Otherwise, we would never get approved for the loans. It's like trying to get approved for a home loan. If you don't have enough revenue, you don't get approved. So being able to do that sequentially, which is a challenge, because then the customer just sees their bill go up and they're like, well, I'm not seeing anything change, which is why we're rapidly trying to get implementation of the execution of this, which is, where these opportunities give us the opportunity to do that.
And great job in chasing those federal dollars and securing them.
Yeah,
Thank you. It's amazing. Well, thanks for sharing our most valuable resource details with us, water, and I think that's it for.
Can I just close with?
Sure.
We really appreciate our customers, and I misspoke earlier, and I want to make sure that that's on the record, that I'm trying to empathize with some of the challenge that my staff is experiencing, and I didn't want to broad brush, and I know my comment did. So I want to make sure that I'm on the record that we are doing this for our customers, because that is our purpose, and our customers have not, in this billing system, received what they should expect in terms of a product and an execution, and they are frustrated, and we expect them to be frustrated, and we will work with every single one of them that wants to work with us in terms of helping them understand and helping to get clarity in their bill. And in the background, we're pushing this vendor to fix this. And so my comment before was flippant and not appropriate. And I want to make sure that I'm on the record saying that we understand the frustration, and we want to make sure that we are as dedicated as anybody to fixing this. So.
Well, we appreciate that, and
So thank you.
We understand that I didn't take it that way. So
Rewrite Peter's evaluation.
no, and you provided a wonderful service to our city and all the water users outside the city. So and frankly, the bill hasn't bothered me, but.
Yeah, well, good. It's great.
I'd like to hear that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and we appreciate the support of the Budget Advisory Committee. We appreciate the support of the Water and Sewer Board. We appreciate the support of the council, because without their support, none of this execution goes through. And so it takes all of your support to help us be able to do this. So thank you.
Nevin, do you want to move forward with sales and use?
Yeah, I think you'll go ahead and jump in if that works for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I have 6:30. I think can we do this in 15 minutes?
I can do something in 15 minutes.
Okay, well, let's start on it.
I'm sorry it took more time.
No, we started a little late. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, and whatever we leave off, fine. I think we just need to vote on one thing.
Oh, and for the most part, I think when we talked, at the,
Do we still have quorum if James leaves?
I have another.
Yes, we have 3 here.
Okay, yep,
I'm so sorry, Evan.
You're totally
Gotta
fine.
get to another event. So
that's totally fine.
thanks, James.
So at the end of our last meeting, you're totally fine. At the end of our last meeting, I wanted to follow through and put together this. Just I think the intention that we talked about with this is really better understanding what's available to us, what we're looking for, and addressing some of the questions that we need to figure out what council is looking for from us in this review process and how that might impact the upcoming reporting process. Do you mind advancing the slide? So first I'm going to go through background just quickly. Then second, we're going to get into the meat of this presentation, right? What is the role of the BAC? Then third, look back at this past review process, and then from there, we're going to talk about member and stakeholder feedback. That includes staff, that includes the committee members, and that of course includes our council members.
Wonderful.
And then the fifth section is just metrics and other things that are available to us through Public Works and the Police Department, and then we'll close out.
Wonderful.
Next slide, please. So background, next slide, please. So in November 2022, voters in the city of Englewood authorized these 2 ballot initiatives providing for the dedicated sales and use tax. Next slide, please. What is the role of the BAC? Next slide, please. So the ballot language describes review by a citizen committee, and it's mirrored. Both ballot initiatives have pretty similar language around here, but it's vague. What does review mean? Of course, next slide, please. The City Council determined or designated the Budget Advisory Committee to be the citizen committee role, but I think there's still a little bit of ambiguity around what review actually means here. Previous council guidance has suggested that the review process is most helpful when formatted as a simple pass or fail review. So that's definitely, if we get different feedback from council or different feedback asking for us to maybe provide a scale or something, we can do that. But our past feedback has just been, don't overcomplicate it. Yes or no, does this meet the expectation? And then if a failure does occur, we're responsible for communicating the rationale for why the failure occurred, right? And what aspects of our expectations or, our expectations are facsimile for the different constituents and the folks living in Englewood. So why we anticipate that they may not have approved of whatever expenditure. Next slide, please.
Great. By the way, to me, that was one of the things that we really wanted articulated tonight, and thanks for pointing that out. Because it's relatively straightforward from that aspect, and instead of getting into the weeds, so to speak, I appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Of course. So now just to quickly go through the 2023 review process, and feel free to jump in here if I'm missing something or there was another. And if there are any details that I didn't include here, Phil,
Sure.
jump in.
Okay.
Not sure why that got formatted that way. My screw up on those all being ones.
Hey, that's right.
So throughout the year, Public Works and the Police Department staff tracked various expenditures that they believed met the parameters for the dedicated funds. Then those expenditures were all included in a spreadsheet. You may remember last year, the expenditures that were included on that spreadsheet well exceeded the actual availability of funds. So we had plenty of things to choose from. Should we determine, right, that we'd actually feel more comfortable including one expense over another, we actually had a little bit of opportunity to do that because the money was already spent in these different areas, and we were more applying which of these really met the requirements to be incorporated into these dedicated funds.
Yeah, and I have to say, excuse me for interrupting, but that's something I want us to look at again. I didn't necessarily recall that being the case, but I just didn't remember some things.
Totally.
Is that something that we had a formal document on?
Well, we had the spreadsheet, which this process formalized as a document. So we can continue to formalize that document and make it, if there's changes that we need to make or whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to just bring it back up for our next discussion on this if we can.
And we'll actually
Before the meeting. I'm sorry, because I would have provided that. I didn't.
Oh, you're totally fine. And we'll actually look at that document in the next slide.
Oh, okay, great.
And we do have it included in the packet.
Awesome.
So that spreadsheet was then provided to community members to review individually in March. And then following that review, the committee members discussed their findings and determined whether more information was necessary before approving or rejecting any of the requested expenses. And then that discussion then, we met with various staff, including the city manager, including representatives of both Public Works and the police department. Last year, we didn't reject any of the expenses, but we definitely asked for a lot of clarity on some of them. Some of them, I think, we felt were much more straightforward than others.
I recall that.
Next slide, please. So I didn't include the entire spreadsheet, but I thought that this was a good overview because you could see a snapshot of both Public Works and the police department and what the different categories are. Under this described services provided column, with later on down in the spreadsheet, it includes both FTE equivalencies
I remember
and
that.
job descriptions. We'll get to that in a moment, but that's one of the changes that we talked the most about. But I think there's room for potentially changing this to provide more detail or to better represent what we're looking for to these departments. Great. Next slide, please. So this is just gonna, at a very high level, reflect collectively. So I didn't say so-and-so council member said this, so-and-so committee member said this, but this section kind of goes at a high level representing some of the thoughts, feedback, questions that different members and stakeholders have had on this process. Next slide, please. So this is just for reflection. This is the statement that this committee included in our annual report, basically saying we really appreciate all the effort that staff have put into putting this together and reflecting this, and wherever possible, we hope to get additional information to help define and specify these funds and to better distinguish how these funds are being used as opposed to other funds. Next slide, please. So a couple of questions that were raised. What does the city and staff want to see as an outcome for our sales and use tax review? When will the audit need to be completed? What is the voters' expectation for the sales and use tax approval for both for Public Works and the police department, and are we achieving this? And are the metrics and results for the sales and use tax simple, measurable, and attainable? And what were some of the issues that we identified during the last process? Next slide, please. So now getting more into just different feedback. There's a need for more emphasis on what is actually being done. As I mentioned, one way that I think that could be helped is by creating a separate column for FTE equivalency and responsibilities of those roles. But there's also an impetus on this as a PR and communications tool, right? These are public documents and these are public funds, and these are things that were explicitly provided to the city for pretty explicit purposes by the public, right? So we want to make sure that we are communicating that in a way that is clear to the public. So I think a lot of different folks have emphasized that opportunity of using this review as a public communications tool. And there's also a desire to focus on understanding clearly what activities fall under the homelessness and alternate policing rather than just a number of hours. So getting more detail, moving away from just including FTE equivalencies. That's super helpful from a budgeting standpoint, but we want descriptive characteristics, we want role descriptions, we want some clarity there. Next slide, please. Then other thoughts and suggestions. We don't necessarily need to measure the expectations, but we need to just focus on providing the clarity to pass the audit, which is our review process, right? If expectations are not being met, it's not really clear what our process is, but I think as a committee, we kind of expressed a desire to then raise those concerns to council for further clarification, right?
Right, and then also, to some degree, provide a roadmap, if you will, for the police department, public works, so they can say every year, okay, here's what we need to provide to pass this budget committee audit on an annual basis.
Yeah, and another big piece of feedback that I found particularly helpful, I think you've spoke to this, I think several people have, is that things that I think initially we were a little mystified, or several of us were like, how is that alternate policing? The presentation from the police department really helped. So I think one thing that we discussed last year is potentially, is there a possibility that we could get, not just from the police department, but also public works, those presentations earlier, right? So that we have that to assist us as we are reviewing this, reviewing these expenditures. And we talked about that, knowing that we're constantly pressed for time at these meetings, having those materials ahead of time are potentially an effective way to cut down on questions while simultaneously better educating these committee members to review this process. Next slide, please. So now just getting into a couple different metrics that are available to us. Many of these were highlighted by the city manager and the assistant city manager. Next slide, please. So we found out that the Englewood Police Department tracks a great number of different metrics, and many of which I was referring to from the 2024 Englewood Safety Report. But some of the ones that might be helpful include types of offenses by groups. So the city categorizes different types of criminal activity into these groups, and some of those groups are much more related to the charge of these dedicated funds than others. Where offenses occur within the city, that is really valuable because some of the alternate policing is involved in zone enforcement. So trying to dedicate resources to areas where more police time is spent on different types of addiction and mental health related calls. Number of drug offenses is of course related to addiction. Residency, specific data about the impact team, which works a lot in these areas. Number of incidents with co-responders, and also, I didn't include that there, but percentage of incidents with co-responders, right, is valuable. Unique contacts, right? Who's actually getting these? Are these the same individuals, or are these a variety of different individuals? Number and percent of behavioral health interventions, percentage of officers trained in mental health first aid, which just wanted to highlight here. Englewood's been doing a great job with that. I believe that we're still at 100% of our officers being trained for mental health first aid. And the relative percentage of time spent on zone enforcement. Next slide, please. For public works, there are probably more metrics that are fairly valuable, but some of the ones that I think got called out previously were number of projects completed each year. We've seen, right, projects happen or more projects happen now that we have these funds, right? Citizens' requests for different projects is something that we didn't really look at last year, but may potentially be valuable knowing that this is a citizens' initiative, and the time required to complete projects. I believe that potentially looking at that and looking at how the funding gets impacted, that might be interesting. Next slide, please. So now wrapping up, closing and additional questions. Next slide, please. Are there pieces of feedback, questions, other information that folks in this room feel should have been in this presentation that I overlooked? I know I moved through it pretty quickly and everything's at a pretty high level, but I want to make sure that this gives us, background and some information. So if there's something I missed, please let me know.
I don't think so. I think it's a great presentation. I think you provided enough about just the short history of this, and also sort of some of the feedback was great, and also some of the things that we think could help us establish the criteria for the audit purpose, right? When do we talk to Public Works and the Police Department next? Do we know? And so what I'm thinking is, the one thing I wanted to make a motion to do tonight was to request that we have Public Works. So Public Works is in April, and Police is in March.
Yes.
Can I make a motion that we request these a month in advance from those departments? Is that something that we can ask them to do, or?
You're wanting, so you'd like the police report in February? Because right now you're getting the information prior to when you're going to be doing your review in June. So you basically you'll have the police information 3 months before your review in June, and then you have Public Works almost 2 months.
Last year, I do think it was helpful. I think getting the slides ahead of the review process was helpful.
That's all I was thinking.
But last year, it was helpful to, after the review process, then be able to have that Q&A time with the police department, which doesn't necessarily have to coincide with their presentations, but
That's true.
I want to be respectful of staff time, and if it's gonna inconvenience people by asking for them to come back and answer our questions, then
I don't think it's going to inconvenience, but if we provide you the information, say for the police department in February, then you'll be ready with your questions. Without them presenting the information, you think you'll be ready just by reviewing their slides with your questions?
I think it might help us better contextualize some of the expenditures, and then, but I imagine we'll still have questions that having someone here to answer would be helpful.
So the week or two that we provide the slides ahead of time is not sufficient, you needed a full month. I just want to make sure,
Well,
be very clear that you
Well, I
needed.
agree with you there. I don't know that it has to be a full month. I was just
Yeah,
saying a month or in advance.
I also
Um,
don't know.
Well, the other thing it might be nice to do is on your slide is to provide those things to them a month ahead. Just so that they can see sort of what we've been thinking about
Oh, like,
in terms of the metrics and some of those ideas, so that when they
That
come
I
here.
agree with.
Okay,
Oh, yeah,
so,
So to kind of steer that conversation or discussion.
okay, so let's
would
do
be
that.
helpful.
Okay, so let's put that together. I think we'll add it to the agenda for January. I may ask you to briefly review your presentation again, but I think if we can have that circulated soon, that we can all look at it and we can add some things to it. And then we can all agree, I think in January, spend 15 to 20 minutes as a group to say, how can we provide this to Public Works and the police department? Just give them something to think about that they can maybe add a few minutes on in their presentations.
I would like,
2 weeks in advance is enough. You're right, Jenny.
I just want to make sure, and we'll make sure we get those slides to you at least 2 weeks in advance.
well, I think that should definitely,
Thanks for that.
I agree. I think that's probably sufficient, as long as we're keeping it at the front of our mind so that the members of this committee are actually reviewing.
Well,
Yes.
there's that, and so that's what I've tried, but I mean, look, I'm to blame as anybody.
Oh, same,
because
same.
a
I'm not
week out,
trying
I'm
to-
like, oh, okay, I gotta get this done.
Not trying
And
to
so-
point fingers
No,
there.
no.
I mean
No.
that as much for me as, yeah.
No, but you're right, and I think it's more for us, and I think that those departments, I mean, they can handle that.
One thing that I would appreciate during that January meeting that may be helpful, just to try to get it clear to the Public Works and Police Department as early as possible, is if we could try to actually look at that spreadsheet, see if there are any changes that we want to make. I obviously have my one that I've railed on quite a bit, but any other changes, or like maybe any requests for changes to the presentation itself, right? Is there information that we're asking to be included in that presentation? I think last year we said the more detail the better, but since then I think that we've recognized too that we have asked these departments to keep their presentations fairly short, so I think.
Yeah, we need to, and we should provide them sort of the perspective guideline of just this specific issue as part of their, and then help them out.
So the more that we can clarify those expectations during that January meeting, I think if we could try to incorporate that discussion into that discussion you were talking about in January, I think that would be great.
Okay, so what we'll do for January, we'll add 2 weeks, actually maybe beginning of January, circulate the spreadsheet, we'll circulate your slides. We'll put that in the agenda to make a decision on providing the information just for sales and use tax in advance by a month to the police department and also Public Works.
In preparation for that meeting, would it be helpful for us to provide you the June report that Public Works and Police provided in addition to that spreadsheet?
That would be nice.
Okay. So you currently, in your packet this week, you do have a copy of the spreadsheet, so you can start looking at that
Okay,
at
I
any
didn't-
time.
I
But
don't have
we'll
my email.
also forward to you in January, the presentation that accompanied that spreadsheet review.
Thank you.
Yeah, and forgive me for not looking at that.
Oh, no,
I didn't have the
worries.
internet
No, there was
today.
there was a lot today.
Well, we appreciate what you all do for us, so.
Yeah, my comment is just thanks, thanks for putting that together.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
as we look at the metrics and think about this, in terms of a pass-fail audit, just what are the essential pieces we need to be able to determine, yeah, this was how these hours were spent. That's
Absolutely.
all we need. We don't need a lot of extra.
Yeah, absolutely.
And-
And give the departments that in advance so they can say, yeah, or they can say, you guys are unrealistic, whatever it comes to.
Yes.
But
My apologies for not sending these slides out in advance. I did them
It's
over
okay.
my lunch break today.
It's fine, we appreciate it. Members' choice? 2 members? 3. Yes.
I do have just a
Sure,
comment to
sure,
make.
sure.
Just wanted to let you know that starting next month, Tyson is going to officially take over the role as recording secretary. He's been performing the duties of that role this past year, so we're going to officially recognize him for his hard work.
That's great.
Mazel tov.
Congratulations. Awesome. Well deserved. Okay, no members' choice. I think we can adjourn this meeting.
And
Oh.
we're gonna postpone the vote you requested until,
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. Jenny made a good point. We get those 2 weeks out anyway, and frankly, it's really should be on us a month out to give that to them. So in January, we need to make sure we leave here with some conclusion.
that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that,
No, thanks for clarifying.
Yep.
So, all right, meeting's adjourned.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Did everybody want to sign the card?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you so much for,
Yeah,
Jenny.
Jenny, that's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
Amazing.
really, truly, very, very thoughtful, very kind.
Poor
No, I
Jay.
know he'll appreciate it.